Welcome to a special edition of Breaking Badness. Our team was recently at Hacker Summer Camp, and we had the chance to speak to industry experts about the current state of cybersecurity, how things are evolving, and of course, how AI is playing into things. We are kicking off our series with an interview about the fascinating world of operational technology and industrial control system security with Lesley Carhart, Technical Director, Industrial Incident Response at Dragos. Lesley took us on a journey through the unique challenges of securing critical infrastructure, from power plants to elevators, and why it's not as simple as updating to the latest operating system. You'll hear about the unexpected skills needed for incident response in this space, including soldering irons and custom serial cables. We found out all about why OT security is often called immature, the potential impacts of AI on both defense and attacks, and how Lesley navigates tense situations between IT and OT teams. Plus, don't miss Lesley's insights on work-life balance in a high-stress field from their surprising hobby outside of cybersecurity. With that, Breaking Badness is next. So Lesley, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at, is it Dragos or Dragos?
Dragos.
I've heard it, yeah, I think I've been pronouncing it wrong for a while.
A lot of people do. It's Dragos. The name actually came from the Neverwinter Nights Dungeons & Dragons character generator.
No way, I didn't know that.
So that's where the pronunciation and the name came from.
Dragos. Okay, perfect. And how long have you been there?
I've been at Dragos for 6 years now, and I was one of the very, very early hires of the company to do incident response. I think I was like employee 30 or so.
So you talk a lot about operational technology and industrial controls. So how would you say the landscape has changed maybe in the last 5 years or the last decade?
So OT cybersecurity is such an important topic that everybody tries to avoid talking about because it's hard. And most organizations do have ICS or OT systems under their purview today, and a lot of them aren't even aware that they have them. They're everything from your heating and cooling systems to your elevators to your power systems, water systems in your buildings, data center backbones, etc., and the backups for those, as well as industrial technologies like water, power, oil and gas, manufacturing, transportation, etc. So Dragos exclusively works on those, and I exclusively do incident response in that space. So I just respond to, like, say, power plants being hacked and do forensics on them, or let's say a manufacturing facility or biomedical, etc. That's the kind of work that I do on a daily basis.
So how frequent are attacks on? Would you say
it's my full-time job? So that's what I do every day. It's very, very frequent. And they're challenging environments to work in for a variety of reasons. I'd say the first one is that there's a lot of legacy systems in them. We have a lot of really critical Windows 95 computers out there running a lot of really, really important things in our society. And they can't necessarily be replaced because there might not be a vendor in the world that makes that thing anymore, that supports that technology. And we're talking about physical kinetic things there, like elevators. You can't just stick a new computer on it. It was built to work with this Windows 95 computer. So unless you're going to go buy a whole new power plant or a whole new elevator, you're not going to just swap out a computer like a Windows 10 computer in its place. So we work with all this legacy stuff, and it's doing really, really important things. So we also can't do anything to disrupt how it's working because it's so, so, so important that it's stable and reliable, even if it's a really old, low-resourced computer. So everything we do in cybersecurity in that space is really, really hard, from building secure architecture to doing monitoring to doing incident response, because we have to be so delicate with those systems and so very aware of what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're doing incident response, especially industrial control systems, you probably have to be on site. So
it's a mix. If people could do their own forensic evidence collection, especially from higher level systems like Windows systems, they can potentially send us stuff remotely, but we do a lot of on-site response. There's a lot of older systems, non-standard systems, and we've got a lot of really weird gear. We carry soldering irons with us, and we have to build custom serial cables, things like that for the really old devices, the lower level industrial devices, things like that. So yeah, it's a little mix of everything. And we work some odd cases too, where we have to take photographs of equipment states and look at wireless networks, things like that. And that really requires us to be there.
So a fair amount of travel?
Oh yeah. I'm on the road all the time. And I love it, but that's not the life for everybody in cybersecurity, for sure.
Did you have to teach yourself some of those skills, like the soldering, or how do you learn on the job when you have to go to places like that?
A lot of people in my field, which is a niche in its own, which is industrial cybersecurity, have really weird backgrounds. My first degree was in avionics and then electronics before network engineering. Mm-hmm. And so I have that weird background of both electronics and wiring skills along with industrial technologies, along with cybersecurity. So a lot of people you'll find in the space that I'm in have really weird backgrounds. It's like they worked in an oil refinery, or they were a train conductor for a long time, and they understand processes. That's the really important thing you have to understand to do this, is consequences and processes. What are the really bad things that can happen, and how do things work? Mm-hmm. You really have to understand how things work to understand how to not break them and ask the right questions. So yeah, I mean, I've got that weird background. A lot of people do, but I'd encourage anybody who's interested in getting into this space. There's a space for you. We really need a lot of people. We need more people in industrial cybersecurity for sure.
Is it hard to recruit?
It's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
There's a couple of reasons for that. There's like a divergence in skills. Like, think about the forensics that I do on Windows 95 and Windows NT computers. And think about me going to a college and trying to hire somebody who knows how to do that, or knows how to build a custom forensics tool for a PLC. That's not what they're learning in school. They're learning how to use XDR and EDR, which is great. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love modern security tools. There's really cool stuff in Windows 11. There's really cool stuff in EDR products. We don't have that in most ICS networks. So we have to go find people who are willing to learn like serial protocols. Mm-hmm. And that's like not something that's taught from a fundamental level, foundational level in university programs or boot camps anymore. So it's really hard to hire people. It's not like the technological things can't be taught. It's like learning to think through processes, learning to think about how stuff works at its basic levels. That's harder to teach.
When you talked about this technology might be working with an old operating system, if you, for example, had a new hotel with newer elevator systems, like, are those built to accommodate future technology, or is it all kind of, this is how it's built today and that's how we have to approach it when it might be hacked or something like that?
That's a super interesting question. So a couple things to understand about industrial technology. First of all, the life cycles are really, really long. So yes, they're making systems today with Windows 11, but those Windows 11 versions are going to be in use for the next 30 years. What we're seeing in production right now, we'll start seeing in the real world in the next couple of years, and then we'll be seeing that for the rest of my career, certainly. That's the kind of timescales we're thinking about, because when they build something like a power plant, it's like buying an IBM system in the 1980s or the 1970s. You buy a package. And it all is certified, tested, warranted to work together. You can't just take one piece out. So when you're doing a version upgrade to maybe new computers, that's a major, major thing the vendor has to approve and test. And you have to do it during like a maintenance outage. You can't just do it any month, any part of the year. You have to wait for like that one day a year you shut down production, or you're going to lose maybe millions of dollars. So long life cycles, really long life cycles. And the stuff that is coming out today, yes, it's newer operating systems. There's more security built in. People are thinking about that stuff. But it's going to be a long time before we see that everywhere. Maybe in 10, 15 years, we'll start seeing broad adoption of Windows 11 on things. But by then, Windows 11 is going to be super vulnerable. So it's a never-ending problem there of we have to find ways to be creative and secure these really old systems and these really, in a lot of ways, very sensitive, vulnerable systems, because they have to be. Like when you hit the red button on the wall, the emergency stop button, it has to work if somebody's going to get hurt by a machine. Yeah. You can't add encryption to that. You can't add like a bunch of intermediate systems and firewalls and things, because when you hit the red button on the wall, the machine has to stop. Yeah. That has to be really simple protocol, really, really simple signal that does work every single time. So that's how we think about those processes.
You know, in preparation for this conversation, mm-hmm. I had listened to you on other podcasts, and you had described OT security as immature. What would it take to make it mature, in your opinion?
It's not so much like tacking on whiz-bang cybersecurity controls. It's these foundational security hygiene concepts that we're trying to get people to start adopting. So it's like, if you can't update the Windows 95 computer, let's think about segmentation. Let's try to put it on an isolated segment where it only has the communication that it has to have to operate properly. Maybe we can't isolate the system. Well, let's put some monitoring around it. And then fundamental things like, let's have an incident response plan for what we're actually going to do in this environment, which is really weird if something gets hacked into. So really foundational security hygiene type stuff over like, oh, we're going to put XDR. We're never going to put XDR on everything. We can't do that. We can't put agents on everything. The lower level devices will never support them. But what we can do is start thinking about maybe some of the things we adopted 10 years ago, 15 years ago in an enterprise environment in terms of architectural controls and understanding how to build secure processes, monitoring, detection, things like that we can do in ways that fit into a industrial world, into an industrial network.
Calling all gamers and hackers. This Saturday, Domain Tools will be exhibiting at the B-Sides Nova's 8-Bit Conference. Level up your InfoSec knowledge and connect with our team and others in the community this Saturday at George Mason's Arlington campus. For more information, visit bsidesnova.org.
In the super late 90s, early 2000s, there was a rush to like internet connect all the controls. Yeah. Old serial controllers get an interface popped on. It's like, it's great, I can now do this remotely. But should you be able to do that? That feels, in hindsight, we're probably, I'm of the opinion, probably rushed into this a little bit too much.
Did we rush into it? Yes. People rushed, just like they rushed into cloud, just like they rushed into whiz-bang XDR. Like people see it when AI, ML, anything, ChatGPT, everybody rushes into the newest whiz-bang thing. But can we disconnect those systems? No, not really. I see like 2 air-gapped networks a year, really air-gapped networks a year, and I do this full time. There's a lot of reasons why there's network connectivity in these networks that are good reasons now, like telemetry. Like processes can become much more efficient when you're collecting granular data from sensors all over them and sending them to a central point and doing calculations. Whether that's power or that's manufacturing, oil and gas, things like that, like sensory data is really integral, telemetry from historians, etc. And then also the remote access, like that's a huge thing. We've eliminated a lot of necessity for better or worse, for human operators in some remote facilities because things can be done remotely. We're starting to see cloud in industrial as well. We're starting to see cloud telemetry, cloud monitoring systems, etc. So they're doing important things. The rushing into it was doing it in maybe not the best architectural way they could possibly do it without the security controls you'd expect to see in an enterprise network. Because, again, they're 2 different worlds and people didn't know how to do it. And we're cleaning up a lot of that mess now. But the connectivity is not going to go away. We can't just disconnect these systems now. Like, it's doing important stuff. We just have to control those environments, control those connections in a way that doesn't interfere with their ability to do their job safely.
Is AI playing a role in OT cybersecurity at this point, or?
I get asked that so much. I mean, you gotta think you're getting in the TARDIS. You're going back 20 years to what I do every day. We're going back to 2000 something. So on the surface, in defense, not so much. We're using old school packet analysis. We're doing network passive detection to detect threats, things like that, because these systems are so old and vulnerable. But on the attack surface, we are seeing some uses of that stuff to, first of all, phishing emails, things like that are always more effective when they've had their language checked by something like a ChatGPT or something. But there is another concerning thing there, which is we've relied on security through obscurity in industrial networks for a long time, and it actually worked. To cause a disruption to an industrial process, like it's not just, I get on this HMI and I poke some buttons. I see that from security people all the time. Like, that's not true. There's lots of safety controls, physical safety controls, human controls, to prevent the operator from screwing up and hitting the wrong button. That's always existed. It's not for a cybersecurity reason. It's so that the system doesn't break and kill somebody, or the operator doesn't hit the wrong button because they haven't had enough coffee. So there's a lot of controls in these networks, and an adversary getting into, say, a water treatment plant they wanted to tamper with has to evade all those controls to do something meaningful to that process. But the problem is the security obscurity barrier kind of goes down when you can suddenly tell ChatGPT to write some code to poison the water. ChatGPT is a screwdriver. It's a tool to do specific things, like any ML tool out there today. LLMs, etc., are good at taking big data sets and finding commonalities. And they absolutely can be told, I have this model of PLC. Write some code to do XYZ. They might not know about every safety control or every human control in play to prevent that thing from happening, but it's a big drop in the bar to entry. You don't have to go out and learn a language, learn how to program that PLC, write ladder logic for it, etc. you can just tell ChatGPT or whatever to say, I want to increase whatever chemical level in this PLC by 20%. And it will write you that code. So that is a little bit concerning.
So AI wouldn't be, you'd say it's not the quickest solution to the limitations that you've had in terms of recruiting or... No.
Not at all. It's a human problem.
Mm-hmm.
This is a human problem. It's a strategy problem. It's a relationship problem. There's poor relationships between OT people and cybersecurity people. Well-earned poor relationships after telling them, why can't you just update everything to Windows 11? And that's a problem to tackle, as well as these simple hygiene-based things. Those aren't whiz-bang programming problems. That's hey, can somebody make an asset inventory and a network map? And can we look at those and see if there's anywhere we can segment the network? That's not as so much of a technological problem as a human problem, a discussion problem, a money problem, a staffing problem.
So how, when you go on a site and you're meeting with, operational engineers, and you talk about how there's kind of that rift between cybersecurity and them, how do you handle that going in when you might not be the most welcome person there?
No, not at all. I tell people I'm not an incident responder, I'm a marriage counselor. And a lot of times I know how to kind of speak the right language to talk to the engineers and talk about consequences, talk about the process and their concerns. And that sometimes makes me the person who has to sit at the middle of the table between the OT people and the cybersecurity people. And I have to say 3 words, because they won't talk to one another unless I'm sitting right here with maybe a box of donuts. It's food bribery. Please just share your asset inventory with one another. It's challenging. It's really, really challenging. And yeah, there's a lot of mistrust. I think my worst case recently that was our team had to go into a site escorted by the police because the 2 teams were blaming each other for a system issue. And eventually, the city council or whatever called us in to do the investigation and figure out who was in the right. And those relationships can get very, very poor. And again, I'd encourage anybody who's I don't have any OT stuff. Whether you know or you don't know if you've got some ICS stuff in your environment, you really need to go find that out, not from just a technology perspective, but to find out who owns it and make nice with them.
Mm-hmm. Is that a skill you've had to build over time, or would you say it's more innate within you?
Being an incident responder is a lot of crisis management, and so it's a lot of dealing with human emotions. It's a lot of dealing with crying people, panicking people. If you decide to get into differ or incident response in general, not just in OT, not just in ICS, you have to have a personality type where you're willing to be screamed at 4 days at a time, sometimes at 2 a.m. Because it's like any customer service, any retail work, anything like that. People take out their feelings on you.
Right.
They will take that out on you because they are having the most stressful day of their career. So
not only do you have to absorb that potential negative energy, but you still got to have empathy. Because
they're having the worst day of their career. Maybe they're losing $20 million a day of production, and they're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their reputation and their coworkers as well. Their coworkers' jobs. They're incredibly stressed out. I mean, I see a little bit of everything. Sometimes people are super nice, but they're in tears, and sometimes people are just ready to scream at you and not trust anything you're saying. It's people deal with stress in different ways.
Can you give us an example of how you've been able to kind of turn that around so it's not such a fraught relationship?
Active listening. So understand, being empathetic in your responses to them. And it's the same as dealing with any customer service job. It's the same as, again, working retail or something where people are just awful. It's I understand this must be really stressful for you. Can you tell me, what do you need from me right now? What will help this be better? Things like that. And then coming in and being a voice of reassurance is really important in cybersecurity. You cannot show your own lack of confidence. And let me tell a secret to anybody who's young in differ and IR right now. There is a first day for every single case where you're oh my God, what if this isn't the time I catch the bad guy? What if this time I don't find any evidence? What if they're gone? You're smiling, I love it. What if this is the big one where I don't find anything? You always have that initial oh my God, this is going to be the one. I'm not going to find anything. I'm not going to find their malware. I'm not going to find their backdoor or whatever. And you always do. Eventually you find something. You find some pivot point, and then it feels good. And maybe you don't get the whole case, but you get at least part of the case, the meaningful bits. But you can't let that uncertainty that we all feel at the beginning of a case show. You know your job. You know how to do your investigation. You're a good detective. You're a good cybersecurity analyst. You have to go in as the voice of confidence, and you have to reassure people by looking like you are assured of yourself.
I think on that note, is there anything, like, are there any myths, to your job that you'd like to, debunk once and for all?
I think I talked about a few of the really critical ones in OT that I really want people to get through their heads. The first one is that it doesn't exist in their environments. Whether you have data centers or you have buildings, you probably have some kind of OT systems, and they probably do really important things for your operations, and you need to track them down. And the second one is that you can do OT cybersecurity like you can IT. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm a terrible salesperson, but you can't. I do this every day. This is what I do. You are dealing with an entirely different set of consequences, from people dying to processes failing to damage to the environment, all those things, real life physical consequences, and you have to do cybersecurity accordingly and safely. And finally, as a consequence of those long life cycles of those systems, you can't just go in there and replace things. You can't do cybersecurity the way that you are familiar with in your enterprise environment. There might be commonalities. There might be tools you can use for both. There might be people you can cross-train in both. But you have to think about it as a different problem because of these safety implications and because the age and the sensitivity of the systems is so much greater.
Online, you are Hacks for Pancakes, which you have described as kind of, moving stuff for pizza.
Yeah.
Well,
self-deprecating. Yeah.
Shout out to PancakesCon.
You're so nice. You're so nice.
Well, that was my first question was, do you actually like pancakes?
I do.
Excellent.
I am a foodie in general. It's not like, I just eat pancakes every day. It's just like I went to a lot of B-sides and things over the years and volunteered. I run clinics and stuff like that. And people always seem to tend to buy me food. It's always like, we'll buy you breakfast. Can you work for 14 hours at this con?
Oh.
Okay.
It's very kind.
Okay.
Well, and that's something I want to ask you too. Like Daniel had asked about your travel schedule, and you just talk about all of your volunteer work. You're very open about mentoring. Mm-hmm. How do you handle that balance? Like, you are running at so many different things. What does your work-life balance look like? How do you take care of yourself?
Incident response already, I don't know if I could do the job that I'm doing if I had, young kids or something. I'm on the road all the time. I do the volunteer work. I run clinics. I run a conference. I do public speaking. I teach for SANS. And a lot of that I do because when I was trying to get into cybersecurity in the early 2000s, nobody helped me. Nobody would help me. Nobody would talk to me. And it took me a long time to get into the field. I didn't look like what they wanted to be a cybersecurity person. I didn't look like their friends, and I don't want that to happen to anybody else. Yeah. I'm really passionate about seeing other people not hit the roadblocks that I hit on my way. I will never say, I suffered, so you should suffer. It'll make you tougher. No, we can get people jobs now. That's silly. The world is different. Degree programs are different. Certifications are out there now. There's so many ways to get into cybersecurity for any budget, for any interest. And that's why I do that stuff. That's why I'm so passionate about doing all these things. And I have work-life balance. I have hobbies, but I am on the road a lot. That's not for everybody. I'm on the road maybe half the time. And again, that's a lifestyle you have to decide whether it's right for you and your family.
Before we leave, can you tell us a little bit about your hobbies?
Oh, yes. Outside of the glorious world of cybersecurity and all the stuff that I do, I am a martial artist. I'm a 4th degree black belt in 2 martial arts. I study 4 martial arts. I teach teenagers and middle schoolers. I'm never going to be super badass, super tough martial artist person, but I enjoy teaching. I enjoy working with kids that age, and I have a lot of fun taking them to competitions around the country.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's not nearly as cool as it sounds. All it takes to become a black belt, for anybody who wants to know that, is keep showing up every day for a very, very long time and keep working hard. That's what it takes in the end, is just keep showing up and don't quit. Yeah. Like many hobbies, but I love doing it, and it's a lot of fun, and I love working with the kids.
How long have you been doing that?
15 years. I started in college, actually, and I've been teaching for about a decade now. So.
Leslie, this has been wonderful talking with you. Thank you so
nice
much for
having
us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we really appreciate it. But
always a pleasure to talk with both of you.
If people want to find you, where can they find you?
I'm on most social media things. I'm most active on LinkedIn and Mastodon, on InfoSec Exchange, but I'm on pretty much everything as @hacks, 4 pancakes, Hacks for Pancakes. And I have a blog. I have an email address. You can reach out to me. I do speaking engagements. I do clinics, volunteer work. Reach out, and I'll see how I can help you.
Excellent. You are findable.
I am definitely a findable person.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lesley, so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
That's about all we have for this week. You can find us on Twitter @DomainTools. All of the articles mentioned today will be included in our blog post, which can be found at blog.domaintools.com. Catch us every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time when we publish our podcast and blog. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week on another episode of Breaking Badness. Until then, remember, don't drink and click.